Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Will. I'm going to be talking about building a beginner-friendly game project. So I'll do some introductions. I want to give you some context for who I am and who Endless Access is and what it is that we're trying to do. Then I can give you a brief overview of our game. And then armed with that knowledge, then we can actually get to the meat of the matter, like talking about how we've designed Threadbare to be accessible to beginner contributors and the trade-offs that are involved in doing that. So I have some properties of myself. I'm a dad, an amateur musician. More importantly, I'm an open source software developer. I've been doing that for going on 20 years, and I've been at Endless for going on 10 years. But I've only relatively recently switched to working on video games, and before the last couple of years I had no experience of that at all. So I know a fair bit about computer software, but compared to a lot of people, particularly at events like this, I kind of feel a bit like this when I'm making games. So I'm, joking aside, I'm a relative beginner on building game projects. So one of my hopes from speaking here is that people will come and talk to me afterwards or join our community and suggest a different trade-off in the way that we could design the game, which is sort of a sweeter spot than we've found so far. So I work for Endless Access. We are an education technology nonprofit. We are a global team distributed all around the world, and our mission is the whole world empowered. And the way we're trying to enact that at the moment is by teaching collaborative video game design as a pathway to digital literacy, particularly for learners from underserved backgrounds. So learners in these programs, they explore, create, and contribute to community games. Why are we teaching game making as the way to build digital literacy and skills? Well, making games develops future-ready skills. You learn creativity, collaboration, problem solving, and technical fluency, which can be useful to you in making games and beyond. It connects learners to innovative career pathways around and adjacent to video games that they may not know exist. And at a kind of philosophical level, we can refocus people from being consumers to being creators and contributors to a kind of bigger picture. So we develop course materials around game making, and we run these programs ourselves, and we run them through educational partners who work with us. But if we're going to teach learners to contribute to a real game rather than to a valuable but ultimately just a standalone project, we need to have a open source community built game which learners can contribute to. So we have a tiny games studio embedded in our organization building Threadbare. So this is a free and open source kind of narrative-driven adventure puzzle game, and it's set in a world which is made of fabric, and the world is coming apart at the seams because people stop telling stories to each other. So the player steps into the role of the story weaver character, and they restore the unraveling world by recovering stories and traditions and cultures. We're developing this in the open. The code is released under an open source license with openly licensed art as well. You can play the game right now, there'll be links later on to do that. A key thing to point out here is it's not an educational game. The point of Threadbare is not that you learn anything through playing it, except in as much as you learn through playing any game. But the point is that the learning happens when people join us in building the game. So this is a game that has to serve two not opposite-facing, but sort of orthogonal requirements. It has to be set up for people to contribute to in a meaningful way at a variety of levels, but it also has to be good in its own right as a game for people to play. In some ways, some of the mechanics are maybe not the most innovative you may have ever seen, but it's pretty fun to play. We're very proud of it. And at GDC, we got this nice little badge, which I guess means that something good's going on here. So I talked about how stories are a part of the world, and telling stories is how the character is rebuilding the world around them. But we sort of embed stories into the game at a second level. So as well as the kind of mainline quests in the game, we have this idea of a story quest where you go and talk to a particular elder, and they give you this storybook. And the player can choose to play one of these stories which take place outside of the narrative of the main game. The framing is that the story weaver becomes the protagonist of the story. And so just to give you a kind of flavor of the kind of things that are in story quests, here is a quest called After the Tremor. There's been a strange earthquake, and the characters have to go and find their loved ones in a damaged village. And so in this scene, the creators of this repurposed the grappling hook mechanic you may have seen a few moments ago and turn it into a challenge around reconnecting some wires that were broken during the earthquake. In this world, a kind of magical world with a wizard who can do cool stuff, they've taken a sort of ink-repelling combat mechanic and changed it to, so you change the state of the rocks from lava to inert rock, and then you can use them to rebuild things by moving them through a puzzle maze. And in this quest, you're playing a young weaver, and you have to collect various threads. And in this one, you have to chase this incredibly fast sheep. And if you collide with anything in the world, you die immediately. So incredibly hard. We have a chase sequence, but not one like this. So these are all not quests that we have made. They've been contributed to the game by learners working in independent teams that we'll come to later. So this brings us to contributions. Open source games obviously already exist, but they're not generally deliberately set up for beginner and intermediate contributors and with pathways to guide them through how they can actually get into what is quite a vulnerable thing to go and join this big project around them. So we have a kind of map of what the journey that a learner might go through is. And if you look in the kind of right-hand side, these might be some of the things that are sort of more obvious. There's people in a career, okay, you have a career in game making, and internships exist, but I'll talk more about the stuff earlier in this pipeline where people arrive and build the skills they need to do that. So initially we have a series of like 1-hour workshops which cover the basics of different disciplines of software development, art, storytelling, game design. So here are some art assets that came out of the pixel art workshop there. So these are made by students, and we have a gallery of these. If you look carefully, if you play the game later, you'll find one of these assets in the game. And there are just some really great ideas. I particularly enjoy the ball of wool that's also a cat, and the sad insect that's a ball of wool. And they're just really good fun. Then when learners know the basics of Godot and Git and the other tools they need, then they can build a story quest, typically in a small group. So we provide templates in the project itself, and we provide a kind of GitHub workboard template. So students design, code, create art, and collaborate with one another. They're working in a fork of the game with support from mentors in different disciplines. There are some trade-offs in this way of working. The number of learners we have means that it doesn't scale to everyone working together in our upstream repo, which has 2 maintainers. And it means there's a kind of lower stakes environment where like it's not, if people might be afraid to make mistakes in a big centralized project. So by being in sort of more autonomous groups, people are more free to learn as they go. It does have some downsides that people are sort of taken further away from the core development loop of the game. And as we're going to be seeing for the next 20 minutes or so, like all these things have trade-offs. So all of the story quests I showed you a moment ago are upstream and merged to the main branch of the game. There's about 10 now, I think, and there are an order of magnitude more in forks of the game, showcasing all kinds of weird and wonderful themes. Going beyond that, you get closer to the kind of more generic open source contribution flow you might be familiar with. So we have a bit more scaffolding for less experienced contributors. People contribute directly to the game. They fix real issues from our actual backlog. Sometimes we fix them if we get to them first. Sometimes learners fix them if they get to them first. For this to work, we need a steady supply of backlog items that are good for beginners. And a steady supply of bugs or missing things is never a problem, right? You always have those. The hard thing is to have them in a sort of beautiful, well-maintained, very clearly tagged backlog. And particularly when you sort of have to lay out the steps involved to achieve a task, fix a bug, it would often be faster to just do it ourselves rather than to spend the time to clearly lay out the pathway someone will need to follow to fix it. So this has some overhead, but there is a reward here that contributors can, this is an entry point for people into becoming part of the core loop, that people gain the confidence to take on bigger tasks themselves that are maybe less well specified, and they can support other learners who are earlier in their contribution journey. We've got some really great stuff out of this, so I've just changed the filter on the board to closed issues. You can scan the avatars. We've had contributions from at least a page full of people in this one screenshot across many different domains. Yeah, you can read the labels, all kinds of domains. Don't underestimate how scary it is to send a patch to an open source project. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I don't really think anything of it. I go and open an issue, and if the maintainer doesn't like it, they can just close it, and I won't be offended. But it's actually quite a big step to take, particularly if you're not working in your first language. So a lot of people have done a lot of work to get to the point of submitting these fixes, and these fixes are in the game now. So for one example of something which crossed several different people over a period of different programs, during, I think, more, there was various people working on this enemy, this kind of insect that has these different animations. So we had some concept art, which turned into some actual animation, and then during an internship, this was turned into a functioning enemy in the game who can turn you into a ball of yarn if you get too close. So let's talk about the design of Threadbare as a game. You'll have seen that there's a big variety of mechanics in this game. I mean, it sort of fits in a genre, but there's a lot of different things you can do. So different contributors are interested in different kinds of gameplay. So some people might be interested in building environmental puzzles where you have to solve a puzzle with clues around you, or some might be more interested in kind of fast-flowing combat sequences. Some people might want to build levels which reward the player for exploring, and some might want to just tell a story a bit more directly. So the game has all of these elements. This comes with an obvious trade-off that you might fear that the gameplay can be less cohesive because you have basically orthogonal mechanics all alongside each other. But the variety is good, and we do find interesting ways to combine them in new ways. So recently, we made it possible to both repel projectiles while also grappling around the level. Initially, that was two separate actions. And so once you can do both of those things, you can make puzzles which you can only solve by combining these two. And while we were doing the work, the technical work to enable this in the open, discussing it in Discord and on GitHub, someone in our community designed the level that I'm playing here. We had a test level for this, but they came along and thought, hey, I can think of a puzzle that you could only solve by combining these two things. So this only happened because we were developing this change in the open. I've been talking about beginner contributors, but we have to think about beginner players as well. Many of the people coming to our programs are not sort of hardcore gamers. They're not super experienced with the vocabulary of games. So we initially would teach a control with a little hint, and then we would just never show it again. That doesn't work. People are often jumping in midway through the game without the experience or without the knowledge that's been taught to them earlier. So now we show the controls all the time, and they react to the control method you're using. And by the way, this was developed by a succession of learners building on some initial stuff. A community member who, I don't know where they came from, they came and made the most recent change to always show them reacting to what actions are available. Before that, some other contributors had done the work to make them automatically switch between keyboard icons and joypad icons tailored to the joypad you're using just when you hit a button, which is pretty great. Maybe if you look closely at this, you can see this inconsistency in the icons we use. So if you can see it, come and send us a patch. That'd be great. One more surprising constraint is that not everyone has a mouse or a gamepad, and on most laptops you can't use the touchpad while also using the keyboard. The machine assumes that you're pressing the touchpad with your palm while you're typing. So if you're holding WASD, you can't aim with the mouse. So we have to design the game to be playable with just a keyboard. Which is an annoying constraint for building levels, because if you look closely at these are all at 45-degree angles, because with the arrow keys you can only do 8 directions. So if you have any experience in designing grappling controls, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love your help with making this feel good on the different control systems. It's a narrative-driven game. Sarah, who's down here, likes to remind us that people think that narrative games are easier to build, but actually it's very hard to keep a big, cohesive narrative, and you also have to build the strong gameplay to go along with it. It's particularly difficult to have that narrative cohesion in a community-built game. So we have a kind of compromise here that we determine the core narrative ourselves within the team, and we're primarily building that out ourselves, and we have the sort of full escape hatch of story quests, but we're trying to find a point in the middle as well where people can contribute to the main story of the game without us completely losing cohesion. So we're moving in the direction of documenting the wider lore of the game so that contributors can build side quests and more entities for the game drawing on this. So this is on our wiki. This is sort of backstory for one of the game elements. There's nothing about this in the games right now, but maybe someone will come along and build it. Think kind of SCP wiki type of situation, but maybe a different vibe. This is all part of making the implicit knowledge within the team about the scope of the game explicit and documenting it and keeping it up to date. It's hard work, and you have to kind of remind ourselves to have these discussions in the open, but when we do it, it's really worth it. Let's talk about technology choices. I mean, I'm stating the obvious. We're at GodotCon. It really wouldn't be possible for us to do this kind of thing without this amazing, freely licensed engine that anyone can use. And it's really important for broad access that Godot can run on anything. It can run on a potato. So not everyone has a fancy gaming laptop. People have all kinds of things. I was developing Threadbare on a 6-year-old laptop until quite recently. Integrated graphics, it works fine, right? So you also shouldn't trust me to make the art for your game. We don't patch the editor, we don't patch the engine, we don't patch the export templates at all. We're not doing anything particularly exotic, so we rarely run into bugs or limitations that we urgently need to fix. So we might need to change what we do here in due course, but because of that, we can say, you just use the obvious download. You can tell people, go and download Godot, they just go to the website, hit download, or they get it from Steam. It's also the correct thing to do, because that's what we're using. We don't have to care about code signing for 6 different platforms, and theoretically, people could also contribute from the editor build for Android or from Zogo on iOS. I don't know if anyone has done that. It'd be interesting to find out. A corollary of that is we have to track the latest stable release of Godot quite closely, because people will always be running the latest version as of when they start. So within a few weeks of 4.6 coming out, we upgraded to that. Sometimes it's a bit bumpy in the 0.0, but the 0.1s generally sort things out. And again, we're not doing anything particularly fancy on the technical side. We use GDScript. It's a beginner-friendly language. It's very well integrated. It works with the most obvious Godot downloads, so we're not using C#. And if you remember some of my colleagues speaking at GodotCon in Berlin 18 months ago, you might think, what happened to block coding? We're not using that here. Rather than being a teaching tool, this is a teaching tool, but we're teaching people how to use the real tools that people use to build real games. And we've designed the game to have many avenues for contribution that don't involve any programming at all. So if you do need to do programming, GDScript is fine. And if you want to make contributions without that, that's fine. We have pathways for that too. We're trying to minimize how many different tools you have to learn in order to be able to contribute. So we're largely sticking to what Godot provides, and that means relatively few third-party add-ons. A side benefit of this is that people can go beyond the materials we provide and find other Godot tutorials on the web. And generally, stuff they see there will be applicable to our project because we're using vanilla stuff. And the reverse is true as well. What people learn from contributing to Threadbare is totally vanilla Godot stuff, so they can use it in their own projects. This is kind of a classic build versus buy dilemma. And the downside is that if we haven't bought, although it's free, you have to build it, or we have to accept less fancy capabilities. So for example, the interactive audio stuff in Godot is pretty cool, but it's a kind of order of magnitude. The things you can do with Fmod and MobiWise are way fancier. We don't have that. Okay, for what we're doing for now, it's okay. And the advantage is that the tools are free. It's one less thing to learn. People can just use what's built in. If you look very closely here, you might see one add-on that we have picked up, Dialogue Manager by Nathan Hode. We explored various tools for dialogue when it became clear that would be a part of the game. We picked this one because it's very straightforward to use. You just write a text file, name of the speaker, colon, what they're saying. You can embed little bits of GDScripts, and so this makes it really easy to tell a story without putting a load of effort into environmental storytelling. You can just dump some dialogue in to do some exposition and then get on with the gameplay. There's no complicated character setup with portraits and moods and so on. Name, colon, speech. The consequence is that there's no fancy character setup. So if we wanted to have portraits and expressions and so on, we'd have to build that ourselves. In fact, one team of learners did in their story quest. But for us, this has worked very well. I think it's a good trade-off. We only use free tools, free as in cost, but preferably as in open source too. This is very important to us from a kind of broad access perspective. Contributors can use what they want, but we don't ever require people to use paid tools. So one example is that several people in the team and in the community use Asprite for the art. It's not free as in cost. It's not expensive, but it's not free. But more importantly, it's an open file format. So even if we have the asset maintained as an Asprite file, you can open the same file in Pixelorama, which is free as in money and free as in open source, and get exactly the same animations and edit it there. So one contributor's choice of tool doesn't affect other people who need to use a free tool. Project structure, it's very simple. We don't have any fancy state saving. We just save a few facts about the game, which means that there are no game state bugs because there is no state. Very simple. But it limits the kind of levels we can design. You have to split longer sequences into smaller scenes, and you can't progress backwards through the game. I'm not sure this one will survive, but for the time being, it's worked out very well. It's a very simple model. It's easy to teach and easy to explain. We don't have a custom main scene that drives everything. We just change scene. It means that hitting the F6 button works. It's good enough for what we need, though we're gradually accumulating autoloads. Remember the set hash thing for later. Some of the levels in the game look like they have a third dimension. It's a top-down game, but we have these cliffs which can raise you above the water. It's all fake. If we have stairs, they're just gaps. You can see the colliders here. You can't walk behind the cliff. The world is flat. This makes it much easier to paint levels, but it's annoying for having enemies throwing projectiles off a cliff because you need to make it go through the collider in one direction but not the other. We need to have like multiple different visually identical water tiles with different collisions. For now it's tolerable, and we haven't found a way to support real elevation without compromising on complexity. If you have ideas, we're all ears. MISC. I ran out of ideas for what this section's called, so it's called MISC. Playable documentation. No one reads anything, myself included, and if you write documentation, it tends to drift out of sync from the game itself. So one of the things we're exploring is having more of the game systems documented in scenes you can play. This is a level I made to test originally a tool to procedurally generate forests and flower beds, and I realized I can just put some signposts in, and now we have documentation. So you play the scene, and the signposts talk to you. We have some time and weather effects, which are purely cosmetic, but the cosmetics look great. And again, you can walk through this, and the signposts explain how the system works, how it works when you link scene to scene. These levels are not currently that well signposted, but we're planning to make a kind of demo world you can go to. Just in passing, I learned this a few weeks ago. You can leave comments in scene files. I didn't know this. It's very cool. When people build a story quest, they get given not a blank slate, but template levels which they can use. They have kind of simplified versions of challenges from the core game, and they can adapt them to their needs. And they have dialogue in there which talks to the player. It isn't in-game. It's sort of fourth wall breaking. So you can play the templates, and then you can quit the game, go back to the editor, and then you can follow the instructions in the dialogue and then ultimately replace it with actual dialogue. So this accompanies video guides and written guides and instruction. But it's one more layer that means that you can really get straight into having something playable and iterating on that. But it was very annoying that step one of making a quest was to take 77 files, copy them all into your own folder, manually rename them all, manually relink them all. Excruciating. So we automated it. There's a tool that recursively duplicates a tree in a folder tree. Once it was written, it wasn't very hard to write, as these things go. But tool scripts are so good. This is like one of Godot's real superpowers. You can very easily just drop in a tiny tool which does exactly what you need. All of our game components are templates. It adds some complexity that you can just kind of swap in different assets and things in the inspector. It adds some complexity to building these scenes, and I think we're going to need to move to a slightly different model at some point. But it's very useful for palette swapping NPCs and the protagonist and so on. Having these things coupled to our learning materials makes it harder to iterate on the core systems of the game. We have to synchronize changes to the game, to our learning materials, and keeping our instructors in the loop. In a way, this is a harder version of the standard documentation gets out of sync problem. You might recognize the shape of the template player from one of the quests I showed earlier. Not everyone uses these template assets, but some people do. And if you do, you get this nice benefit of they have exactly the same proportions as the core game's character, so all the same collision shapes and node positions work. We have web exports. We use this a lot. We have a GitHub Actions pipeline that publishes to GitHub pages. If you look at the URL, the bit after the hash, the fragment identifier, this shows the path to the current scene with just a few bits trimmed off to make it look nicer. So as you play through the game, this changes to reflect the scene you're currently on. And so you can copy this link and send it to someone, and when they click it, they get dropped directly into the scene that you were just playing. This is super, super useful. We have some copy-pasted code that we just move between projects, and one day I'll make an add-on. If you're interested, come and talk to me. We also publish each branch, not just the main branch, and have test builds. GitHub Pages doesn't support this, so I wrote what I like to call a load-bearing hack that squishes this all together into one site. It's super useful. I really recommend making this work if your game is playable on the web, because you can just send someone a link and they can be testing it in moments. And for our purposes, this is great because it works in forks as well. Learners fork the game, they hit enable pages, they hit enable actions, and now they have automated builds of every commit they make to their game. It means that there's one less thing to learn initially. You don't have to learn how to do a web export, upload to itch.io, make an itch.io account, whatever it may be. You still need to use Git, so go back in time and watch the talk yesterday about Backstitch. Really exciting project. We are reaching the scalability limits of GitHub Pages, but this has worked really well for us so far. That's about it. Thanks very much. This QR code takes you to the Threadbare page on our website. From there, you can play the game, you can get the source, you can find our course materials, and most importantly, you could join our Discord and join our community and help share your great knowledge with our community. Thanks very much.
Very much. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. So if there is, I see 1 and 2. I'll go here first.
Thank you. Great talk. You mentioned you use this for education, but is it actually also, do you work together with different curriculums or different schools with Endless?
The short answer is yes. So we have a team of educators at Endless, 2 of whom are in the front row here. So if you talk to the people waving their hands right now afterwards, they'll be very happy to talk more about this. Yeah, so we have in-house educators, and we work with other institutions. So for example, all the quests I showed you were developed by students at a university in Peru. So we work with them, and they and we together deliver the course materials to their students.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I was wondering if you can mention maybe one trade-off on building for learning, but also building for playing at the same time. Because you mentioned this in the beginning. I would like to be curious on the technical trade-off, if you can mention one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is trying to emphasize, trying not to overcomplicate things in the. So, sorry, just to check, are you talking about the kind of internals of the game or the player experience here?
More on the internals.
Yeah, so I think the kind of the big recurring theme is on trying to not overcomplicate the internals, but one of the tricky things here is we also need to make nice abstractions that learners can use without having to write their own logic. And so one of the trade-offs is how much magic to do. So we have these various puzzle components, and there's a question of so for many of them, we kind of automatically discover the nodes in the scene. So if we just go out to, no, apparently I can't. Maybe I can. Anyway, we have the puzzle where you have to kick rocks in a particular sequence. This guy. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. No. That one. And so there's a node which manages the state of this puzzle, and it auto discovers the different components of these signs which tell you the progress and the rocks. And of course, you can replace a rock with anything else that has the same script attached to it. So this is kind of nice and magic because you just drop things in the right structure and it works. And then once you want to do something slightly different than we designed the puzzle for, now all this magic gets in the way of saying, okay, I want to replace this one component with something else. So that's one of the big trade-offs is on like approachability of, kind of just take the Lego bricks we've provided and snap them together in a new way. If we guess wrongly how people are going to want to tweak the puzzles or build a different puzzle off the side of it, if we've designed it in a way which makes it harder for them to do, it can be almost worse than having not tried to make it smart at all. Sometimes making it simpler with less magic would be less approachable, but would make it easier to combine in new ways we haven't thought of.
Thanks.